But most of the stuff I will talk about today is actually done in a project recently completed, funded by the Innovation Foundation, where the DCR Solutions company was founded as part of this project. And it was called Effective, Co-Created, and Compliant Adaptive Case Management for Knowledge Workers. And basically, we developed a new technology based on prior collaboration with Morten and DCR and his company before establishing DCR Solutions of digitalizing regulations and supporting knowledge workflows. So what is this research section about? Well, we are 35 people or so. 20 of them are young persons and 10 are more senior. And we combine people who have a technical background in engineering, trustworthy and reliable distributed systems, blockchains, event-based systems, microservices, process management, process mining, with people who do large-scale data management, but also people who care about the interaction between technology and people and the society. So they look at computer-supported work practices, regulatory and legal compliance, standardization, participatory design. So we actually develop technology in a responsible way that benefit people and society using the technology. So, and my point of this talk is our research in how AI can help us make the right decisions so we can contribute to a sustainable development. And sustainability is much more than green transition. It's also about equal access to goods and work and education. And that implies also a fair justice systems and that we know that regulations apply equal to different people. So, of course, there's a lot of challenges. We have just seen one of the challenges using AI, but preserving privacy. But then related, I mean, as I also hinted at, I mean, there's the problem that all AI is based on models of reality. And all of these models are imperfect because they are models. So they are not the reality. So we need to constantly challenge and question if the data and models are up to date, if we can really use it for the purpose we're using it for. But also if it's legal and ethical correct to actually use this data for a certain purpose. And if we can maintain it, because we don't want to spend a lot of money setting up an AI system if it's only usable for 2 months, and then it's out of date. So we need a constant way of maintaining the models so we can keep using it. And then there was this question that I asked, I mean, can we understand the model? Should we understand the model? Maybe it's not needed for all the applications. And can we understand the outcome of using this AI model? And in addition to that, we should be aware of these different dimensions. I mean, we can use the AI to understand a complex situation right now, understand the legal rules, or understand a case, all the cases in the bank, or look at all the transactions and understand which ones look like money laundering, which ones look normal. But we can also, of course, try to predict the future, which is even more sexy to see, can we predict who will make money laundering or who will make greenwashing or other kind of bad behavior. And finally, we can, of course, try to use these predictions to also change the future. So we can try to adapt based on the knowledge we get from the model. And my key message here is that, of course, if we know it's imperfect models, we can compare it to a weather forecast. We should also be more and more careful because it's very difficult to validate if we have predicted the future correctly. It doesn't harm so much if we only use it as knowledge, but if we then also try to start changing the future based on the predictions, so then we get this feedback loop where we may never find out if this prediction was correct, but we have already acted to change the future based on it. And that can be even more dangerous if it's imperfect models we're using. So one area we have been looking into in particular, also based on this research project, is financial compliance, because here we have an example where we have a very complex situation that we need to understand, namely all the regulations. And right now we spend an enormous amount of money in Denmark on trying to keep up with financial compliance, and that is not only in Denmark, it's actually the same picture all over. And part of this problem is that there are different interpretations of these regulations. So we have the financial supervisory authorities that have one interpretation, and then we have the financial institutions who do their own interpretations, and then they play this game of did we do the right interpretation, and it's very costly and time consuming, and we still get a lot of fines. So what we would like of the future is that we can have kind of an agreed on machine readable regulation. So it's not a perfect model because such thing doesn't exist. But it's a human understandable markup of the regulations that we can then use to provide guidelines of how to interpret this regulations, and also even embedded into the IT systems of the financial institutions, adding on the local policies and regulations that the institution wants to add on top of this. And not necessarily share with others, but then guarantee this regulatory compliance by design. And the basic point what we have now today is that we have tools for understandable assisted markup of regulations. It can be done manually by a legal or compliance expert, but it can also be supported by NLP technologies for finding this is an action, this is a role, this might be a rule, and again, it's not the final answer, but then the expert can see and correct if this is the right markup. Then we have this model is immediately translated into a model of the rules and the actions, and that can be simulated in the tools that Morten is developing in his company. So you can actually not only look at a nice picture of the rules, you can actually simulate what are the possible routes through these rules. And that can then be embedded into case management systems that can support caseworkers. On top of this, you can also go the other direction, because you can extract data from the existing systems. If you can get event logs to see what really happened today. Then we also developed an award-winning algorithm for finding the rules embedded in the current practice. And the reason why we actually won an award last year for being the best classifier of processes is that we, compared to our competitors who produce kind of spaghetti diagrams, you don't get a lot of knowledge out of a spaghetti diagram like this. It shows all the paths. We focus on finding the rules between activities, and that can explain complex processes in a much more understandable way. So right now we have some ongoing Copenhagen Fintech projects. One where we look further into using these technologies for regulatory compliance, and two others that you really should invite my colleague Hugo Lopez to come and present, because they are looking into new areas. One, can we try to use the technology to support the users and get more sustainable consumption habits? And then one, which is a bit more related to what I'm looking at, that can we use it for the new green legislations coming from the European Union to help interpreting these 500 pages of legislation. So in the AI for sure, we are looking at different cases. Morten has been looking at insurance processes, decision processes, where he uses technology to actually implement a no-code solution for managing an insurance claim. And of course, this is something that provides more equal management of the customers, but also more clear rules of when do my cancer or other illness actually account for a critical illness. And you can zoom in on these different phases and see the details of the decision logic, and that can actually be exposed in an online service for going through this work process. So another example of this use is to use it for digital SOPs, standard operating procedures, where instead of having a Word document and trying to find out how should I do something using a Word document, you can make a digital decision graph and then expose it as a online service where you can get support for your decision. And yet another example is to take the regulation for Know Your Customer and then actually mark up what are the when is it we should actually start Know Your Customer procedure, and then put it up as a graph, and then we could actually embed this in the management system of the bank. And Morten will show this example also. So this is again anti-money laundering. What is the workflow inside? I mean, this is a combination of, I mean, you may not call this artificial intelligence. It's more an expert system put into use for actually managing a workflow. But you can then combine it with the process mining. So once you have these detailed descriptions of the activities, you can actually start to mine, okay, what are the rules that explain the kind of the cases that are not money laundering, and what are the behaviors that characterize the actually money laundering cases, and then you can learn some rules explaining the difference potentially. So I just included a few slides from Hugo's projects. So he is looking at this more than 500 pages legislation. And the idea is to take the green taxonomy up, mark it up as a graph, as a rule graph, and then see if you can look at historical cases and run a conformance checker where you look at the traces of historical cases and see, okay, do they really conform to this legislation? Let me see, where did my mouse go? We can also use the historical cases to actually inform this rule graph. And the second project is about these consumption habits, where Hugo tried to see how can we help Denmark to reach this zero emission target. And the idea is to combine regulation and knowledge about energy usage with knowledge about different ways of changing your habits and your behavior. And that could be buying a new car, or buying a new dishwasher, or get rid of the dishwasher completely, and then change your behavior in your home like that. That requires adding another perspective to the models, not only having the temporal rules of the actions, but also having costs. So you can actually start to talk about what is the energy footprint of different behaviors. So that's what they're looking at right now. Okay, I think that was what I had. So I mean, the takeaway here is that there's a lot of potential for using AI, and in particular, if you use it to understand complex situations, then we are in a more safe space than trying to predict the future, because it's easier when you get a model of the current situation to find out is it something we can use for anything as humans than if we try to predict the future. And then we should always remember that this AI is based on incomplete models and data. And one particular promising application where we also right now in touch with the Ministry of Business is to actually do more about marking up regulations. So regulations move from old-fashioned Word documents or other kind of documents to actually a structured markup law that can be more easily fed into computer-based systems.